Laura Turley, and you're watching Feminine Wealth TV, the show that uncovers the diamond tips on creating truly conscious wealth from change makers, world shakers, and wealth creators. So today I'm super excited to have the gorgeous Debbie Spellman with me on the show. Debbie is the founder of DebbieSpellman.com. She's an advocate for positive body image by helping women recognize their inherent value and conquer feelings of low self-worth. She's a mind detox therapist, a coach, writer and speaker, and her message reaches women in over 60 countries. I mean, how fantastic is that? She's also a regular columnist and think fit expert for women in fitness magazines around Australia and around the world. She's also been featured in Cosmo, Women's Day and Australian National Health magazine. And if that wasn't enough brilliance, Debbie is also the creator of Detox Your Mind TV and a master trainer in the Mind Detox method. Debbie, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with me today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes. So look, I just wanted to start the show today with a bit of a funny story about how Debbie and I met. I always like to start my show with how I meet some of my guests. So for all of you out there who think that you can't make friends or do business on Twitter, well, think again. Because I actually met Debbie on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So I was out there, I was writing a blog at the time about exploring a sweeter life. And I found Debbie's work on Twitter and I connected with her there. And since we've actually been doing some work together, we've become friends. Mm-hmm. And it's blossomed from that. And I've been following her work closely. So Debbie, we're here today to talk about the connection between self-worth and net worth, and why people's or women's self-worth in particular might actually be affecting their net worth. So to get things kicked off, I mean, self-worth, it's a bit of a buzzword out there at the moment. What exactly is self-worth?
Self-worth it comes down to how much you value and find worth in yourself. Mm-hmm. So essentially what self-worth is, self-worth. So for women in business, I think it comes down to how much you value the information you have inside and how you give that out in the world. Yes. So what holds women back, and we'll go into this more in detail later, is that if women don't value themselves, they won't value the information and they'll be struck by fear and procrastination.
Oh, we all
have that.
I know. I've even suffered that myself, and I think it's just a common thing. What drew you to that sort of area of expertise and that line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a big believer that your story is your testimony and your past is the perfect platform to which that all stems from. So without going into too much detail, when I grew up, I had major self-worth issues, but I never actually realised it. It wasn't until I went through a mental and emotional breakdown at about age 28 when everything I knew fell apart around me, and I found myself asking, who am I, what do I want, and what's important to me? Because everything that I had set my mind on for all of my 20s was around wealth and success mindset. And so it was no coincidence that I attracted to me the world-leading concierge to the rich and famous, because it was what I epitomised as, I've made it, I'm important, I'm significant.
Wow. So concierge to the rich and famous. Tell me a bit about that. What was that?
Well, it was a company I was working for at the time, and it was everything that I aspired to be, because for me, my belief system told me that if you had money, then you're important. And I grew up with not a lot of money. So I thought, if only I find this poverty belief inside, then I'll be able to clear it, make money, and then I'll be significant.
And
then everything will be perfect.
Yeah.
So when I reached that place, life wasn't perfect. And in fact, it went the opposite, but it was the biggest blessing. Because what it made me recognise, it allowed me to reevaluate how I spent my time, who I surrounded myself with, and what I was doing and where my actions were being driven from. And I think at that time, they were very ego-driven.
Yes.
Very external-driven.
I think a lot of us would suffer from that, particularly when it comes to money and wealth. We're driven by our ego rather than what we truly want.
Exactly. Yeah. And then when you get all what your ego wants, you still remain unfulfilled because you're waiting and you're aspiring to the next big thing that's going to make you happy. So outside of that mental and emotional breakdown, I did a lot of reflection. I did a lot of work over 2 years. And that led me to the path where I am today. And what I recognised is that starting from my teenage years, where I would starve myself so that I was skinnier and prettier so the boys would like me, and I had all sorts of emotional eating problems right through my 20s. I stayed in a relationship for far too long, even though it wasn't serving me, and then I stayed in this business for far too long, even though it went against all of my values. So I recognised the one thing that kept me in all of these places where I didn't necessarily want to be was my lack of self-worth, because I didn't have the courage to speak up and what was important to me, and to communicate my values. So
Did you know what was important to you at that point?
No.
Was there a disconnect between what's important and actually knowing what's important to you?
And that's a really great question, because when you experience a lack of self-worth, you're so driven by other people's expectations and people pleasing and approval seeking that you don't end up doing what is right for you. You don't even know what is right for you.
And then you wonder why you're unhappy.
And then you wonder why you're unhappy.
Especially when even if you have money. You know, I mean, the whole thing of having lots of money but being miserable.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make you happy necessarily.
Absolutely. And that's the core thing in what I work with my clients, is really finding out your inherent value and what is truly important to you and what your priorities are, and creating that as a foundation to then live your life.
And to grow from.
Absolutely. Otherwise you will be driven by your ego, and you will be driven by other people's expectations, and it doesn't lead you to a positive life.
And Debbie, look, you've coached hundreds of women on this now in your business. How big a problem is self-worth out there, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's 100%, because every woman that comes to me experiences it. However, it's my key tool. So how big a problem is it? From my experience with both the women I've worked with and the women who've just come to me and talked to me, there is an element of all of us worrying about what other people think of us. Huge issue with comparison. Huge issue with not being good enough and not seeing our own value. So how big is it? I think it's worldwide, which is why I'm such an advocate for changing the way women see themselves, because and we'll go into this shortly, is I feel that we hide behind these social masks and we're not really being real about who we are.
Or we're afraid to be who we are, and to even explore who we might be.
Absolutely, or have no idea who we are.
And do you find, like, even strong women, you know, I mean, I'm probably speaking for myself here, I would class myself as a strong woman, but a lot of what you're saying would resonate with me, even things that I feel.
Yeah.
Do you find stronger women, or women who, you know, come to you and have this perception that they want to be strong, and they find it really difficult to actually admit that these are some of the issues they're facing?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, let's touch on that element of masks. I believe that we all live behind our social masks, whatever they are, introvert, shy, or maybe you have the mask of perfection, where you think you appear that everything's good on the outside, but on the inside you're falling apart. And I know many women come to me who have a picture perfect life and to some extent have success, but they're so miserable because their internal life doesn't reflect their external, and then they truly believe something's wrong with them. So I think that's a huge issue for one. Secondly, sometimes when I speak to women, they don't really think there's much wrong in their life, they just know they're just unhappy. But when we start digging, there's a huge amount of limiting beliefs that are skewing and affecting their personality and the way they behave. For example, one client recently, she basically had an issue where she could only kind of see one friend at a time. She'd only allow herself to see one friend at a time. So if a new friend
no groups?
No, definitely no groups. She got anxiety, she just didn't like it at all. So then she thought, well, it's just a personality trait. And I said to her, well, let's explore this. Would you like to explore it? And what we discovered is that when she's in a group environment, she gets the anxiety. We allowed the anxiety to take us back to childhood, and it took her to a memory when she was 14 years old, where she had an eating disorder, she was cutting herself, and she hated her own skin. And she said to herself, I hate myself in my own skin. And at that point, she decided that she wasn't good enough. And so what she would do is only work with one friend at a time, because therefore she wouldn't feel worthless, because she could control the situation.
Oh, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't even know these things that are going on. I mean, did it take her a while to remember that particular event?
Not when I coached her through it, but before that, it was almost a non-event. She's like, this is just a personality trait. I don't know why I can't experience more connection with people, and why I can't enjoy group social situations. So for her, she had no idea it went deeper.
I'm just interested, what are the triggers for a woman to sort of come and seek your help? Because obviously they're coming and looking online, they're looking for something. What do they come in? Do they come in with sort of, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm just not happy? And I don't know why. Is there a lot of that, or do they typically know what the problem is?
I think based on my copy on my website, they can resonate with it. One of the key things is self-talk. So every woman knows that she beats herself up, she puts herself down, and she doesn't speak well about herself.
Why do we do that? I do that. I do that. We all do that.
We all do it because there's that inherent "I'm not good enough" belief that is in all of us.
Yeah.
So I think that's really where it starts, is the way they talk to themselves. And then obviously different for every person. Maybe they've been successful but they're unfulfilled. Maybe they've never been successful because they've been holding themselves back all their life out of fear and procrastination.
Yeah, they just want time to change.
And they're ready to change. They're really ready to change. And I think more often women in their 30s and 40s are recognising that they have stuff. Yeah. And they don't understand why they're self-sabotaging. They're very clear of their patterns. They're very clear of their self-talk, but they just don't know how to change.
They don't know how to change, yes, because often we've done work on ourselves and we know what where the problems are.
Yeah.
And fixing the problem is
the whole different kettle of fish.
Now, I know obviously you coach women and your main focus is women. Is it just women that have this problem? Is it a very female problem? Or do you think men maybe suffer from this too?
Do you know what I truly believe? Men suffer from it also, but they wouldn't dare share it. And, you know, I'm not exactly sure where this comes from, but there is an element of when you're a little boy and your mum says, you're not allowed to cry. Don't cry. Big boys don't cry. Or strong boys don't cry.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, in some parenting styles, I think men are conditioned to not show their emotions and to be strong and not cry. So I think there's an element.
You're told to be a man.
You're told to be a man from a very young age,
Yes,
but men still have emotions and feelings, and I think that puts the ceiling on it when they can't express.
Yeah.
I do have a male client that has been with me for a number of years, and he does experience exactly the same stuff that we experience, except the way his comes out is through drinking or gambling or shutting down was how he dealt with what was going on inside. And that was the catalyst for change, because on the outside he has a picture-perfect life, beyond picture-perfect, successful, everything. So inside he was crumbling, and that's maybe where they will go, well, women, we just hold ourselves back.
Yeah, because I think as well, something I've been playing with recently is this whole masculine paradigms that as women, we're trying to live in a very masculine paradigm the last couple of generations. So, for example, in business, politics, money, wealth, these are all very masculine paradigms. As women, we've only entered this, and feminine leadership, we've only entered this arena in the last couple of generations. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, as women we might have, because we're entering a new domain and things are so different now, that these issues are more coming to the fore in a stronger way for us as women than maybe men, because things haven't changed so much for them.
Yeah.
Do you feel that would be why this is all coming up now for women?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just the way that history has gone on, where we're starting to really recognise that, one, we can be equal with men, and although we don't feel that way, then what are the things blocking us? Yeah,
so we know we can in our mind, but maybe we don't yet feel quite as good as our brothers, our uncles, our cousins, our. And
I think we need to go about it differently. I don't believe that their way of operating is the best way for us to operate. The world is balanced, and we need both. So,
and maybe because we've been trying to operate in a more masculine way, it has brought up issues for us in terms of self-worth, and we need a new way of actually working for women.
Absolutely. And men and women aren't designed to be the same, because we bring different things to the earth. So, trying to be that masculine, powerful woman that represses all her feelings and her emotions and just kind of keeps on keeping on, maybe not the way to go.
Not the way to go for women. You know, last week in thinking about this interview and what we were going to be talking about, I stumbled across a money confidence survey that ANZ Bank here in Australia did, and it was fascinating because from the results of the people surveyed, there was quite a large number of people that they surveyed, they found that women are less confident about money than men, and also that men have twice the amount of savings as women, which I found that to be quite astounding actually, because women are, you know, we like security, we like savings, but actually men have saved more money. So it got me thinking about this whole thing of, as women we always say, but it's more expensive being a woman. I mean, I've got hair appointments, manicures, pedicures, I can't possibly wear the same dress twice to the races or to a wedding, and all of the above. Do you think that's more, is that actually a sort of a symptom of our lack of self-worth, though, that we actually value things like manicures and hair and looking perfect more than financial security?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It comes down to your values, and it comes down to what you prioritise. What is driven by our values? Yes, definitely a sense of a lack of self-worth. We spend our money and time on what we value. However, and it's not blanket, it's not in all cases, but I would want women who are guilty of doing that to really look into why they need to have their nails perfect all the time and why their hair needs to be perfect before every outing, and just how much their activities are being driven from the wrong place.
Yeah, and what their definition of them being perfect is.
Yes.
Because they're probably, we're all, all women, we're beautiful and perfect just the way we are.
Absolutely.
And we seem to have this drive to want to always improve ourselves or reach some standard that we set for ourselves.
And I think a lack of self-acceptance is a huge driver in that. When you don't value yourself and you don't accept yourself, then you change the external to appear more, like you said, perfect.
Yeah. I was interviewed recently by Wendy Mack, who we both know. Wendy Mack, she's kind of like the go-to expert for female entrepreneurs. And she was interviewing me on, startups and women who want to start up businesses. And, I hear a lot of women say to me, they're dying to start a business, but they say they can't afford it. So they don't have the money to get started. And I kind of feel, because I did this for myself, I know that if I went in and looked at their finances, I could find hidden money everywhere.
Yes.
And I know that I could make it happen for them. But the problem is that I might have to strip out costs that would challenge their sense of self. So my question to you would be, do you see that in your coaching practice? Women who, they can achieve certain things, but that self-belief or self-worth issue is holding them back in every area of their life.
Absolutely. I had a client only just recently. She's a young woman and she wants to launch a health coaching business because it's important to her. And I believe it all comes down to your priorities, because I asked her, how do you spend your time? Because her excuse, I suppose, was, I don't have time, I'm lacking motivation, and I can't seem to get moving on what I need to get done. And so I said to her, well, share with me what your priorities are. And she listed them down, and work was from the bottom last. And then I said, share with me how you spend your time. And it was very much linked to how she currently prioritizes her life. And I said, if your business is that important to you, you need to move it up to number 2.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just that simple mindset shift of how she spent her time and how it was linked to a set of priorities that wasn't ideal changed around. And she reported back to me this week and she's just gung-ho on what she needs to get done.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic? Just unblock that
she unblocked,
Yeah. Because I know for some women, they would sort of think, I think I went through a patch of this as well, thinking about how much can I really cut back? But you're right, when I started realising that what I was spending my money on actually wasn't on what I truly valued and what I really wanted.
Yes.
It was a mindset shift for me as well, because I wanted to run my own business. So I had to cut everything else out for a while.
Yeah.
And there was no dinners out, there was no getting my hair done, and it stripped me bare actually.
Yeah.
And it did challenge my sense of self, and I suppose that's why that question has come. I think it's something a lot of women would struggle with, but it's definitely a growth experience. What's really interesting as well about this topic is that with the rising awareness of self-worth with us women, it's kind of coincided with the rise of what I like to call the femtrepreneur movement globally, where women are leaving the corporate world in droves. I think it's actually a problem in the corporate world to launch their own businesses. And the rise in female entrepreneurs has been astounding. It's great for the global economy. But there's this kind of push-pull going on. So we have these, we're taking the leap of faith, we're starting businesses, but a lot of female entrepreneurs are not making any money. And it's like this sense of, as I said, push-pull, taking the leap of faith, launching the business, but trying to run it when the brakes are on. How much do you think self-worth and beliefs come into that problem?
Absolutely. I believe mindset is everything, because running a business is not easy, but there's a plan to follow, there's strategies, and it's a numbers game.
Definitely, there are steps.
Yeah, there are steps. People can tell you how to run a business. It's the actual doing, the action steps, where female entrepreneurs, or the women I work with anyway, just hold themselves back out of that fear and procrastination. And I believe it's directly down to self-worth, because if you don't value yourself, you won't value the information you have inside to give to the world, which means that you won't put it out because your fear of rejection or not being good enough. And that hugely prevents women from really getting their unique message out there in the world. I know Max Simon, who is a marketer for entrepreneurs, he mentioned that he wanted to serve in a big way doing meditation and ended up broke because all he did was serve. And he didn't run it like a business, and he didn't do it strategically. He just wanted to save the world, help the world.
And the value exchange, and this is something I talk a lot about in my blogs and in programs, is, there is a value exchange with money. And if you're giving constantly and not honouring the value exchange by allowing people to give back to you in the form of they have to pay you for what you're serving them, the value exchange is not honoured, and then what happens is you become resentful. And resentment and these internally, even if you don't know, that really can shun money even more.
Absolutely. And I know from my own personal experience and from the women I work with as well, when they're starting their business, when they start giving away for free, clients don't get results because there's nothing in it for them. And I know when I doubled my prices years back, the women, nothing changed in terms of my program, but all the women got results. Because they had something in the game, they did the work, they did the homework, and they valued it. So you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't charge.
For what you and charge what you're worth. And knowing what you're worth, I think, as well, is tricky. I mean, would you say, what are the sort of tips for valuing yourself that you can come up with? Have you got a couple of quick tips that you would say, like, to really value your self-worth as a woman?
Well, what I would say is if you're doubting your ability, perhaps you need to just study that a little bit more. You need to craft your skill and master your skill just a little bit more. The second thing is your clients are always one step behind you. You always know just that. You only have to know that little bit more than your clients, and you're serving them. You don't have to be the expert or the master straight up. You've just got to be
an expert to them.
You are.
You are already an expert to them.
Absolutely. And you just have to take them to the next step, because everyone can only go that next step forward. So as long as you feel that you could offer your clients just that next step, then that's all you need to focus on.
You need to focus on. Yeah. And look, I wanted to touch a little bit more on emotions. So emotions and self-worth, and particularly money. So I've done the mind detox training with Debbie. I've actually been trained as a mind detox therapist because I wanted to help my clients unblock their own subconscious beliefs about money and the emotions that are there that often we don't know that are there. But what I found was with some of the women that I've been coaching through this, the emotions that come up, particularly around money, are shame and guilt. Massively. Now, these are really heavy, low vibrating emotions. What do you think emotions like dealing with when you're trying to charge somebody for or value what it is that you do, but you have resentment or shame or guilt attached to money? How do you think that impacts your business and your ability to really make money?
Yeah, I think energetically it pushes clients away before they've even gotten to you.
They can feel it, like literally the vibration, like.
Absolutely, or even in your marketing, in your voice, and the way that you carry yourself and the way that you talk to people, it all shows if you don't value yourself. So how do you work through that? I believe firstly you need to do a lot of reflection. You need to look over your patterns in life. Patterns show a lot into your deep subconscious beliefs. Secondly, ask yourself, I can make a lot of money, or I can make a lot of money, or I can serve this client. As soon as you say that, recognize the self-talk that gets triggered in your mind. And so start writing it down, because you'll have a verbal diarrhea of self-talk that's all limiting and all fearful. And then when you've got that, if you keep reading over that self-talk for a moment, you're going to feel something in your body. And it's normally going to exist between the chest and the tummy, and it's going to be tight or heavy. And I would dig into that feeling and try to identify what the feeling is.
And what the emotion is attached to it.
The emotion, so fear, guilt, shame. And then if you're quiet and if you're mindful and you identify what that emotion is, and you ask yourself, what is it trying to protect me from? Another lot of self-talk will come up. And then if you ask yourself, when did that begin? It will take you back to childhood, to a point where you've picked up something from your family system around money.
And that has become your truth.
That has become your truth. And once you know that, you can see from an adult's perspective compared to a 6-year-old self, is that really true? It might be true for you, but is it truth?
But this is so important because, we don't realise that this sort of work, doing this kind of work, actually leads to business growth. Personal growth, business growth is so important to
hand
do
in
it.
hand.
And so many people skip over it, they don't even know it's there. I had Heather Porter from Autopolygon Business on the show last week, and she had travelled with Tony Robbins on the Wealth Mastery Tours. And I asked her, what was the biggest tips or things that she learned from being on those tours with those kinds of mentors. And she said, when you're emotional, do not make any financial decisions. Do not buy anything, do not invest in anything, because logic goes out the window.
Yes.
But I think what was important for me to understand was sometimes we don't know those emotions are there. So you actually don't know that that emotion is driving you. So this work you're talking about is really, just get really deep and actually feel that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the big principles that I teach with my clients is to never speak if you're feeling emotion.
Yeah.
So whatever the external,
I find that very difficult to do.
when the external event happens, before you even think about responding or reacting, just have a pause. And if there's any type of defensiveness or emotion that's going to drive that language, you just share with that person, I'll come back to you, or let me think about that.
Yeah.
Because whenever you act from that place, it's always an undesirable outcome.
And obviously women with spending. I mean, I think this is a big one for spending. When we go out and spend, there is a rush of emotion.
Yeah.
You either have fear, terrified of buying something expensive, or you have a rush, like what I get, because I'm a big spender. I try not to be, but I know the feeling now that I get of like the rush of excitement when I'm going to buy something.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like a drug, so I've had to have rules in place, a bit like that, where I say to myself, right, if I still want it tomorrow or next week, I'm allowed to come back and buy it, and usually it'll dissipate, and actually I'll be like, no, I don't really want it now.
Absolutely. And how many times have you heard that the term retail therapy? It's so true.
I know.
Because as women, if we're not wanting to deal with what's going on for us, or we're trying to distract ourselves from an emotion, many of us go out and buy something to make us feel better.
Yeah.
It doesn't get to the root cause.
No, it doesn't get to the root cause at all.
And there goes your bank balance, and that's the reason why
and sometimes your business. Sometimes your business,
Yeah.
because the same thing happens in people's businesses. They might not be spending on themselves, but spending on stuff they really don't need yet in a business or whatever. So that's really important. So Debbie, speaking of business and wealth and playing a bigger game with your business, what does the future hold for Debbie Spellman Inc.?
What does the future hold? Well, having been consistently booked out for a year now, I've recognised I need to leverage myself in order to serve in a much bigger way. So I'm taking a lot of my knowledge and wisdom online, and I'm creating certain programs so that I can start reaching a global audience.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And you can reach more women that way as well.
Absolutely.
Getting a message to more women.
Absolutely, and I find women that come to me are at all different levels, and some people need just to understand their negative self-talk and how to overcome that day to day, and then other people need to know who are they on an identity level, and what are they born here for, what's their bigger purpose or legacy. So, and there's a vast gap in between.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm focusing on at the moment, is creating those services that's going to fit each of those levels, and also really delving into my retreats and mastermind. It's really important for me to be able to go deeper so that the women I work with can play bigger. So that's the next step.
really go deep. Because this is a really like a peeling back the onion type process.
Oh
isn't
yes,
it? You can
absolutely.
go as deep as you like with this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if our viewers want to find out more about this amazing work, where can they find out more about you?
Absolutely. You can go to debbiespellman.com, and on there I've got my blog, I'm Detoxing Mind TV, and my podcast, and I'm also on Facebook daily, so come on over and say hello.
She's great on Facebook, actually. She is there daily. Debbie, thank you so much for discussing this such important topic with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thanks to our viewers for joining me again. You can catch, as always, my key takeouts on the Wealth Unplugged podcast, which is on iTunes. It's fantastic, it's really quick, and you can listen to it on your commute or when you're cooking dinner at home. So remember to tune in next week, where I'm going to be joined by Fiona Cosgrove from Wellness Coaches Australia, and we're going to be talking about wealth and wellness. See you then.